Trump administration is giving us more and more reasons daily to not have children. And they are freezing child care funds across America. So this is their way of forcing women back into the house to be housewives, to care for their own kids. But like, they're so dumb, they don't understand that this is not possible. In this economy, it's not possible for women not to work because men are not making enough money. There is a job freeze. We are in a depression, and that they're trying to force us into even further into a depression. We're already in a depression. They just haven't announced it yet. Yeah, they're wanting women to get back in the houses, and they're hoping that this is going to force women to depend on men and latch on to men more, because they want people to create more babies. And they know that when people are in poverty, because they did this experiment on lab rats and they did this experiment on black people when they created the hoods, and they can see Africa is procreating, but they think that making women go into poverty is going to force them back into homes with men and make women procreate the way they want us to. But if you're smart, before they cut off birth control and before you can't get your tubes tied and all that, I would suggest you looking into it, because kids are what brings you to poverty. Most rich people that are filthy rich don't have any more than 2 kids. 3 at the most, but they don't have more than 1 or 2 kids when they're rich, except like if they're like filthy stinking rich, like Elon Musk. He's like a billionaire and he has like 12, 13 kids. Or unless you're just dumb like Nick Cannon and Future, and you're just going around just creating kids and not really, Nick doesn't even know all of his kids' names. So anyway, y'all, ladies, if you are smart, please buckle down on your birth control or go abstinent. And please, the worse that things get in this country, the more crime is going to take place, like rape. You can get pregnant that way. So think about that, and think about arming yourself, like I always tell y'all. But yeah, let's get into what everybody is saying about them canceling the funds for daycare. And I'll talk to you ladies later. Bye.
Is insane, and people are not paying enough attention. The Trump administration just froze federal child care funding for every single state in the country. Not just Minnesota, not just states under investigation, all 50 states, because of alleged fraud sparked by a viral right-wing influencer video. The Department of Health and Human Services says no state gets child care money unless they can now prove the funds are being used legitimately. So instead of investigating specific centers, they shut off the money for everyone. States now have to dump massive amounts of paperwork on HHS just to keep childcare programs alive. Attendance logs, licensing, inspections, complaints, investigations, and if HHS suspects fraud, they can hold the money indefinitely. This all started after a conservative influencer filmed a few Minnesota daycares, claimed they weren't operating, and accused Governor Tim Walz of massive fraud. No court ruling, no confirmed findings, no evidence reviewed by auditors. J.D. Vance praised the video. Elon Musk boosted it, and HHS cited it directly when freezing funding. Millions of working parents are now caught in limbo because of a YouTube video. Governor Walz called it a political move to defund programs that help families, using fraud as an excuse. This doesn't punish fraudsters. It punishes parents trying to work. It punishes child care workers. It punishes kids. Child care subsidies keep people employed, businesses running, and families afloat. And the administration just turned the money off nationwide to score political points.
This entire child care funding crisis started with an unverified YouTube video rooted in racial panic. And that should alarm every parent in this country. Let's be clear about how this began, because people keep skipping that part. This did not start with a substantiated complaint. It did not start with an investigation. It started with a YouTube video making inflammatory claims about child care centers serving immigrant and non-white families. No evidence, no verification, just racism framed as concern. So instead of doing what government agencies are required to do, investigate, collect facts, I don't know, follow due process, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services froze funding first and demanded proof later. And this is nationwide freezing. So, as a nurse, this makes no sense. In healthcare, you do not punish first and investigate later. That causes harm. And that is exactly what is happening here. So, if this gets to the point where federally funded childcare centers close, parents lose that care immediately. So, that means missed work, lost income, and job loss. In healthcare, that means nurses, aides, even physicians and essential staff cannot show up. You cannot keep hospitals running if parents have nowhere safe for their children. So, children also lose early developmental screening. These centers are where speech delays, behavioral concerns, and learning needs are first identified. When those doors close, those issues do not disappear. They show up later in schools, emergency rooms, and special education systems, costing more and working worse. Families' stress skyrockets. Chronic stress increases anxiety, depression, hypertension, and burnout. That is basic public health. And this does not stop with federally funded centers. When those centers close, families flood private child care programs. Prices go up, wait lists explode, smaller private centers face increased scrutiny, fear of audits, and pressure to over-document just to stay open. The entire child care ecosystem becomes unstable. And we need to say the quiet part out loud. This is not just racism, this is also an attack on women. When childcare disappears, women are the ones pushed out of the workforce. Women lose income, insurance, retirement security, and professional momentum. That is not accidental. That is what happens when policy ignores evidence and targets systems that support working mothers. Racism is expensive. Sexism is expensive. And once again, children and women are paying the bill for policies driven by fear instead of facts.
I hope people understand just how serious and how planned this all was to force more women out of the workforce than any other point in history since the end of World War II. Trump has cut federal funding to daycare centers in every state, and all they needed was a virgin chud to show up at daycare centers either during off hours or with two men and a camera demanding access to small children, pretending not to know that the reason they're locked down is because of men like them. This was planned in Project 2025. And for the women who think this isn't going to affect them because they don't get federal funding for their daycare, they're going to be in shock. When you cut funding to the bare bones daycare centers, well, then they close. And then the middle tier, they start raising their prices because their wait list goes up. And then the hoity-toity fancy daycare centers, well, their prices go up too. And when women can't afford these daycare centers, they start to close. And then women can go back to these violent marriages that J.D. Vance is such a fan of. And then they convince girls in high school that there's really no point in going off and getting a career and an education because you won't be able to use it anyway if you decide to have a child. This is some handmade stuff, and it was planned, and it is an attack on women everywhere. Trump is cutting funding that directly targets single mothers in 5 Democratic-led states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. First, his health department is freezing funds to the Child Care Development Fund, which provides funds to working parents. Social services, including prenatal care, food banks, school lunches for kids, pre-K programs, and emergency housing for women who are trying to leave violent men, child protective services, and child support enforcement services. So all those dads who are not taking care of their children, they can go on doing that while we continue to shame single mothers. And the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. These are sometimes families who either themselves or their children are going through cancer treatments. He's very much targeting single mothers and poor families, and they haven't provided one single valid reason for doing so other than for spite. If you rely on any of these programs in these states, contact your state and make sure that they will still be providing the services that you need.
$38,000 is how much we are budgeting for daycare expenses in 2026. We have 2 kids that go to daycare full-time. My son is in the pre-K class. He costs about $342 a week. And then my daughter is in the toddler class and she costs $400 a week. Now, we did factor in a very tiny decrease when my daughter moves into the 2-year-old class. So for the year, $38,000 for 2 kids to go full-time to daycare, which is just kind of insane. And my son doesn't start kindergarten until the fall 2027. So we still have 8 months of 2 in daycare in 2027 as well. Daycare is going to cost us more than our mortgage, and that's pretty insane. But let me know what your biggest expense is going to be in 2026.
So this Minnesota daycare scam is just another false flag from this administration. It is a way for them to continue the assault on women. It's laid out in Project 2025, page 486, I believe it was. It just states it. They want women back in the house. They want them to be making babies, doing anything their husbands want. They're trying to get rid of no-fault divorces. So they're going to use this bullshit fucking hit piece as justification to cut off all federal funding to all 50 states for childcare. It's an assault on women. And this is going to affect everyone. All right? Buckle up, MAGA, because you're going to start. 2026 is going to be the year that you start feeling these fucking effects that you voted for. And I hope it bankrupts every one of you motherfuckers. I'm done this year. I'm done. I'm done playing nice. 2026 is going to be hell, guys. We're going into midterms. This fucking administration is backed into a corner, and they are going to do everything they can to hold power. So get ready. Buckle up. It's going to be one hell of a ride this year.
There is no world in which I think the solution to daycare costs is for women who work from home to watch their kids or parents who work from home to watch their kids. And I'm answering this comment because I feel like this person has good intent here and they're genuinely asking to learn. And they said, realistically, if you work from home, do you think you can avoid daycare? I'm struggling with this idea as someone with no kids. And my answer to this is an overwhelming no. I think you need childcare. And the reason I think that is, first and foremost, a lot of companies have policies that say you cannot work from home and have your kids there. So the company you work for really determines whether or not that's even possible. And on top of that, you're essentially asking the person who's working from home to do 2 full-time jobs. You are doing your job that if you were in an office, you would be doing by yourself at a desk uninterrupted with little children demanding your time. And if you've ever cared for young children, then you know it is a grueling job. It is never ending. It never stops. It's snacks and bottles and naps and diapers and all of the things. And so expecting one person to do both things is just not sustainable. And I say this as a mom who has 4 kids who have gone through daycare, but also worked from home with my kids because of the pandemic and daycare shutdowns and all of those things. That truly was the hardest time of my life. Like, it was the most burnt out I've ever been. I reached a breaking point. It was so unsustainable. And I actually think it's a reason so many women are leaving the workforce, because it's not possible to do both. And yet we have this narrative that, well, if you're at home, then of course you can also watch the kids. But we often don't do this to men. We say these things to women. We expect them to do both. Of course you can take calls and also feed the baby at the same time. Why not? Why not? Because it leads to burnout, because she never gets to focus on her work or do deep work. She's context switching all day long, going from caretaker to work, and it's never ending. And so I really don't think it's the solution for the reason that it's typically not allowed at companies, but also because it's expecting women to do 2 jobs, one that's incredibly demanding and unpaid, and the other one that is paid, right? And just because the work is happening at home doesn't mean it's not work. You still need to pay attention. You still need to focus. You still need to give your time to that job you're being paid for. And asking somebody to do that while watching kids at the same time is really difficult. Now, I will say, I know there are a lot of women out there who are doing both right now, who are working from home full time and caring for their kids. And typically they're doing this because of the high cost of childcare, because it's very hard to find childcare, because childcare is incredibly expensive. Even if you're looking at a nanny, it is so much money that so many women are sacrificing their time, their energy, their mental, emotional well-being to do both because they can't afford the childcare, right? And so most women that I know who are doing both, it's because they simply can't afford to have their kids in childcare and they don't have any other childcare available to them. It's not because it's the choice they made or would have made if they had another option available to them. And so, no, I don't think it's realistic to work from home and provide care all day for your kids. There's a reason people hire nannies, right? And nannies are incredibly well paid because it's a very hard job that requires a lot of time and attention, and you can't do that well as working full-time from home.
So I made a post like a month and a half ago about me crying over the cost of everything, and it has like 200,000 views or something like that, and everyone in my comments was telling me, like grown-ass women were telling me to just like quit my job to not have daycare costs, and someone who had been like living in my comments and defending my honor just tagged me in this video that I will try to tag below about all of these grown-ass people telling mothers to quit their jobs. What fucking planet do you live on that you think women are out here able to just quit their jobs? I've been told to quit my job. I've been told to sell my car. Oh, people are delulu.
Of course, Trump is freezing funding for childcare nationwide. It was always part of the plan. They just needed a fall guy, and it turns out Minnesota's going to be it. Like, seriously, it's part of P2025. They don't want to fund childcare centers in this country because they want to force women home. Women are the predominant employment of childcare centers. Also, when families can't afford childcare, it's usually the mom that gets forced to stay home. It's the Christian nationalist wet dream. I mean, think back to the campaign last year when J.D. Vance himself said that their plan for childcare and making it more affordable for families was that grandparents should just look after the kids, as though grandparents in this country aren't forced to work until they're dead. And just to be clear, this isn't just about keeping women at home. It's also super racially motivated and absolutely fucking disgusting what they're trying to do to the Somali community. This was always the plan. Minnesota was just the fucking fall guy. And before you tell me that, oh, Nick Shirley's a journalist. No, the fuck he's not. He's a J6 insurrectionist who went to CCOT and acted like it was Epcot and not the death prison that it is. And he partnered with the Republican House Speaker, Lisa here, who wants to be governor. So she has all the motive in the world. I'm not remotely surprised that the same people who believe Christopher Columbus discovered America, even though there are already people here, believe Nick Shirley when he claims he uncovered something that was uncovered a few years ago and has already been, investigated and in the process of being prosecuted. Actual journalists have debunked Nick Shirley. And for the party who claims to care about kids and want to protect the kids, they sure as fuck aren't doing anything to do so. I would argue that the only people who showed that they wanted to protect kids were the people working at those daycare centers that he showed up at and didn't let him in.
Did you know that this is going to increase domestic violence and intimate partner violence? For those of you that know already, this is a feature, not a bug. But in case you would like somebody to lay it all out for you, this is why. I'm an educator in domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and human trafficking. Increased financial dependence equals an increase in control. What causes domestic violence and intimate partner violence is power and control dynamics. Economic dependence is the number one thing that traps victims. It is a major tool of coercive control. This type of a shift is also going to strengthen an abuser's hold on somebody because it's, if you can't afford to leave, how do you leave? How do you attend court, go to shelter, work additional hours if you don't have childcare and can't work? This increase in stress is also going to contribute in a volatile way. And like a lot of these policies, rural and tribal communities are going to get hit the hardest. Childcare deserts are already a thing. This will worsen that. It becomes structural, systemic entrapment. I have long talked about how the dynamics of power and control start at the very top, like in our government, and trickle down into our homes. Legal, custody, disputes, disagreements, this will also become increasingly weaponized. It's already very weaponized. Childcare and somebody's ability to provide childcare is often discussed in custody cases. Here's the thing, economic stability is violence prevention. Policies that impact women impacts domestic violence, gender-based violence. Full stop. These mechanisms that increase people's risk of being victimized go up when something like this happens. It has been happening all along. People have been talking about this from the very beginning. On a hopeful note, community organizing will and continues to be the most important thing we can do. Follow along for more like this. Let me know what you think in the comments.
What we're being told is this childcare funding freeze is about fraud and accountability. But is it really? But what if this has absolutely nothing to do with fraud? Because Project 2025 actually laid this idea out, that Project 2025 wanted to see way less federal involvement with childcare and wants to severely cut or even eliminate federally funded childcare programs and instead push the onus of that onto states that already could not afford it. And here's the trick of how you can accomplish that. It's doing exactly what this administration is doing right now, freezing the federal funds, letting daycares panic, letting everything fall apart, then looking at it and say, see, this system doesn't work, so why are we funding it? Even though it's a situation that only exists because you froze the federal funding. But the result is going to be that people, specifically women, are going to be pushed out of the workforce because they no longer have access to affordable childcare, which of course somehow that is going to be reframed to tell you that it's a very big win for family values. If fraud was the real concern, wouldn't we be seeing things like audits and other ways to investigate what is really going on instead of just saying we're freezing all funding? This is what dismantling part of a system looks like when you don't want to come out and say exactly what you're doing. And the really hard part is Project 2025 told us exactly what was going to happen, and some of you still don't want to believe that that's a thing.
What happens when women can't afford childcare? Spoiler alert, domestic violence risk increases, and we actually have a perfect population that we can look to that illustrates this. Military families. I'm an Army brat, so I experienced this reality firsthand, but I want you to look at the data. Military spouses, of which 90% are women, experience a 21% unemployment rate. That is 4 to 5 times higher than the overall civilian population, despite the fact that they are generally more educated than the broader civilian population. And 63% of them report some form of underemployment, meaning they're either working part-time when they should be working full-time, or they're working in jobs and positions that are not commensurate with their experience. Remember when we said that they're generally more highly educated than the general population? And 46% of these active duty spouses have children under the age of 6 living at home. Nearly half. Which means they need accessible, affordable childcare to work outside of the home. Childcare as a primary barrier to military spouse employment has been well established. While 68% of active duty spouse respondents report needing childcare in order to work, 1/3 cannot find childcare that works for their employment needs. Why doesn't it work? 58% of respondents said that childcare is too expensive. 47% of respondents said that childcare is unavailable or the wait list is too long. And would you look at that? 40% of those families say that they are struggling to make ends meet. And yes, income and socioeconomic status are already well-documented risk factors for domestic violence and intimate partner violence, but researchers released a really interesting study last month. They were attempting to target specifically the way that income affects domestic violence rates. And what they found among the most vulnerable populations by targeting the earned income tax credit is that an additional $1,000 of after-tax income decreased the number of women experiencing domestic violence by nearly 10%. The number of incidences went down by 21%. Yeah, lots of repeat offenders out there. The number of incidents went down 21%. Yeah, a lot of repeat offenders out there. And despite the fact that the military makes it very difficult to pursue domestic violence charges against active duty service members, they still have a rate of domestic violence that is twice that of the civilian population. Not only that, their numbers only account for married spouses, where the civilian population statistics include current and former intimate partners, not just spouses. And that is taking into consideration that marriage is proven to be a protective factor against domestic violence. When you restrict access to affordable childcare, you push women out of the workforce. When you push women out of the workforce, you financially disempower them. And when you financially disempower women, domestic violence goes up. Now, I'm not saying they're doing this on purpose. It wasn't Project 2025. But I'm not saying they're endangering women and children on purpose. But there are only two other options. Either they don't know and they're incompetent, or they do know and they don't care about women and children. So, just something to chew on. We needed a new ballroom, though.
Any attack, freeze, pause, stop, cut to childcare funding is a direct attack on women in the workforce. I will not be explaining further because it is so crystal clear. It's alarming.
Parents and daycare workers all over America are waking up to find out that the federal government is saying that they're not going to pay daycares on the presumption that they're guilty of fraud based off of a YouTube video about Minnesota. But where does that stem from? Meet Amy Bach, who is charged with defrauding the Trump administration of $260 million, was raided by the Biden DOJ and FBI, and the prosecution started under Biden and finished under Trump. It's her. Look at her. She's not Somalian. And it wasn't a daycare. It was a feeding program, and she sent out invoices for Somalian children that she never fed. So then why punish all states and all childcare? This is the prequel to The Handmaid's Tale. There's no rational reason to punish every other state. Even if you say you're going to not give it to Minnesota, why do it everywhere?
So yeah, ladies, now is the time where you really need to get selective with your wombs and really, really selective with who you are procreating with. If you still are procreating in 2026, I don't know why, but I just don't know why. Like, there's too many channels like mine out here warning women why they shouldn't and what this government is doing to women to force y'all back in the homes. I really think their goal is to force white women back into the homes to procreate because they want more white babies. They don't want brown people here or black people here. So I don't think they're trying to get us to procreate as much. They want us to stop. So that's why, you know, black women are being treated bad in hospitals and being taken out in hospitals. They don't want us procreating. I don't think they even need black and brown bodies to work in their companies anymore. They have hoarded so much wealth, they don't need that anymore. So now they're trying to make this utopia like white country that is supposed to thrive with very little to no brown people at all. In their minds, that's just like something that's really going to happen without the people putting up a fight and without all out war. That's what they're thinking. Because MAGA is not, I wouldn't say it is a cult, and I wouldn't say it's a political sect. It is a religion. These people have been brainwashed to think the way that they think since they have been younger. So that's why some of y'all's parents are out here like, and you don't understand why they're saying the stuff they're saying and acting the way they're acting, because it's their religion. If all you watch is Fox News, that's part of the religion, and that's what they have been taught is truth. So it's much deeper than what you think, and it's much more dangerous than what you think, because they do see this as a religion and as a way of life, and this is what their God is telling them to do. So they're not only slow, they're religious. And studies have shown that religious people are not as smart as people that are not religious. They don't think for themselves. They just believe what they're told. And I can say that I was like that. At one point in time, I was a Christian. I wasn't like a conservative MAGA Christian because I'm black, but I was a Christian and I believed a lot of the stuff that I was told. But now on the outside looking in, I'm like, wow, how could I ever just believe that? What made me really leave the church, y'all, is actually reading the Bible. I was in the church for at least 7 years, 6-7 years before I actually read through the Bible for the first time on my own. And now I've read through it 2 or 3 times, and I'm just like, yeah, I've been gone 10 years, and since then I haven't even picked it up, because I'm like, I have no idea how people believe this stuff. But once you're awake, and you can't shove the genie back in the bottle. You can't go back. So yeah, get down in the comments and let me know if you are losing your child care benefits, if you know anybody that has. And ladies, if y'all know women that are losing their benefits and don't have any help, I suggest y'all get together and do the best you can to help each other. This is about to get hard for women, so women are going to have to come together and help each other as much as possible. That's all I have to say for now. Y'all get down in the comments, like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you ladies later. Bye.